John Williams documentary dropped over on Disney Plus earlier this month, but does it offer enough substance to deliver on the unfamiliar? Hello and welcome to Cinema, where we focus on the film. I'm Josh, this is Simply Cinema. Let me know down in the comments below. Have you seen the new John Williams documentary? Is it good, is it bad, or somewhere right in the middle? Or if you're waiting for this review to decide if you're going to see it or not, make sure to like this video if you enjoy it, subscribe if you haven't already to join in the film culture community where we talk about love of cinema as a whole and getting right into the synopsis. Bringing together decades worth of John Williams work, they managed to cultivate multiple interviews and behind the scenes footage growing about the uprising of John Williams, becoming the one icon that we know and love for the ultimate movie making cinematic history that he has pulled off. And taking it right into positive, this is just going about John Williams' life, going about the maestro that we all ultimately know and love today, known for his iconic scores in Star Wars and Indiana Jones especially, but multiple other features that you may be less familiar with, that this film entertains you a lot more. It sort of goes kind of chronological throughout his life, not necessarily diving deep into the experts of the things that are going on in his personal life, but still things he went through, things he faced along the way, those that are unfamiliar with his life, such as myself kind of. I got to learn a lot more. It was informative, but also entertaining by the emotional strides that it manages to take, taking multiple forms of archival footage, looking at the background, whether through photos, whether through videos taken during movie sets, other things throughout his young childhood, certain things that go about along the way that manages to really take upon this great pacing throughout the editing that manages to hold upon itself, and just how we dive into his life, his personal standings for why he got inspired so much by music, how he got so good at the person he is today with all the music that he takes on the standards, the ear he has for listening, and also being able to pull off all these incredible pieces that we have known and loved just through the iconicity of Star Wars, Indiana Jones, but multiple other sounds that you just know immediately is him from just be able to compose this orchestra that he is so passionate about, always bringing to film, not being familiar as much with today's technology, but also being intentional about reviving the orchestra that was only utilized within these older films, but as age come on, technology became more of a form of artificially creating the music that he isn't against, but he is all for creating that authenticity with all the humans that create this sound through this band that can really create all these different sounds that really brings a love letter to music as a whole, to people that individuals can create the music themselves as a team, as a band. So the way that all comes about and just being able to manage all these other things, there's multiple different interviews, those inspired by his work. Steven Spielberg is a big one that was also in the room with him at times for the showcase of this movie, and how they really go about all these different other directors, these actors that worked with him, other music artists that were inspired by his work, being informed by the nature of who was connected with him, those that have had past stories, past history connection, that ultimately brings about something extra to what this documentary has to offer. Flows about in a nice nature to the way this documentary all turns out, because of all the ways that it manages to tackle all of these different things. It doesn't have a strong bias on Star Wars and Indiana Jones. While those can take up a portion of the film, it makes sense to the nature of how big those are, what John Williams' views were with making sequels for them, because he's not normally all for creating compositions for those sequels and other sequels, but for Star Wars, Indiana Jones, those sort of stood out, and especially his work with Steven Spielberg, why he became connected, becomes a big part of his story, and is explored here in a deep enough motive that you can really understand, really go about the motions of his life, and also discovering other features along the way. Certain films don't always get covered as deeply, but that's where it still presses upon how much time is needed for each thing that people may care about most within what this documentary is covering. It's still the focus on the music, especially as this documentary title suggests. So just the way it goes about all the music, all the flow of the story of his deep life, certain things that he may have struggled with here and there, just really handles itself nicely for the flow of how you're really tackling this film as a whole. And going into the mix elements, there are certain elements where I sometimes preface where if it's a music documentary, I hope the editing flows along with the music of the idea a little bit nicer, and there's not necessarily a flow to the music in the background that works nicely as effectively with the documentary. It doesn't necessarily make or break the documentary, but it sort of does turn off some of the creative juices to what you may be wanting a little bit more from it. So some of the background music that wasn't composed by John Williams, doesn't really fully effectively work for the documentary itself. There are certain parts of the documentary itself also that it sort of teases certain references with his children, his wife. There is a daughter and his current wife that is a part of the documentary, and it sort of teases parts of his life where they start to go into what his childhood was like, certain things with his children, with his wife, that feel like they're going to expand a little bit more. And I know it's sort of representing that it's part of the music of John Williams and not necessarily John Williams as a person fully, but because we are getting all the ins and outs here and there of some of his life, it feels like there could be a little bit more to the time spent with how his children were impacted, how his wife was impacted, certain things that may explore a little bit more depth to not necessarily their lives, but how they were impacted by John Williams' work, whether his music personally or whether he was away in the studio so much that there were certain things that go about along the way with that, not even to bring the negative energy that would sort of break the flow of the emotions that are going about, but still being able to understand what could have all been bigger insights that the children or his wife could have provided just for the nature of what all was going on, how busy he is as this composer, that whether it affected himself as a father, as a husband, certain things that could have been dissected a little bit more to the nature of what I might have been feeling would have been covered more within this documentary. It's still a grand focus on the music, but there's still parts of his life that aren't fully explored, don't necessarily feel like this is a full-on John Williams biography of sorts, but still satisfactory if you're not familiar with where he came up with and certain things, certain films that he got inspired by. So it could be a flow or a hit or miss based on the nature of that. But overall, this is a great documentary that I do recommend over on Disney Plus, which I have to rate as simply 8 out of 10. Let me know down in the comments below, what did you think of Music by John Williams? Was it good? Was it bad? Or somewhere right in the middle? Make sure to like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you haven't already to join in the film culture community where we're talking about the love of cinema as a whole. And as this all in, make sure to do yourself a favor and go watch a movie.